it's exploring the opportunities to grow throughout that journey, because no day is static, no week is static, no month is static, no year is static. Our life is not static. We're talking about the correlation between the biology and our own
Right.
growth, but lean into growth and be willing to find the gifts and challenges and expand through that. But when we're talking about real estate, it's again, it's
Welcome to the Hidden Investing Show with Holly Williams. Holly is the founder of KeepMore.com, author of the Hidden Investing book, general partner in over $100 million in multifamily apartment communities. In addition to multifamily holdings, Holly has been a real estate investor for over 25 years. Now here's your host, Holly Williams.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first Hidden Investing podcast. I'm Holly Williams, and I am excited that you're here. And I'm also excited that my good friend and business partner, Tyler Chesser, has agreed to be my first guest. And I don't consider him he's such a great friend that we're just going to have a conversation here. And that was stupid to say. But anyway, so as you know, I hope you know that Tyler has a world renowned, it's in the top 100 podcasts called Elevate. And, where he hosts discussions with world-class investors everywhere. And what's amazing to me about Tyler is that he is all about mindset and expansion and personal development. And, he started, and as an aside, his main job is he's co-founder and managing partner of CF Capital. And I've worked with them on 3 projects, and they know what they are doing. And I'm super excited to talk to Tyler today. Hello, Tyler.
Holly, oh my gosh, this is such a huge honor. I mean, you've become one of my greatest friends, and I tell a lot of people that you're like my sister. And, sometimes we bicker and sometimes we get at each other, but we always love each other. And I'll tell you that, wow, you are an incredible inspiration yourself, and someone that's just continuing to push the bounds in every aspect. And I know that like your book in particular has impacted so many thousands of people. You as a business partner for us at CF Capital has been tremendous. And I just admire you so much. So it could not be a greater honor for me to join you today, Holly. Thank you so much for having me.
I am just so excited. So Tyler, tell us a little bit about how you got into real estate. And I'm particularly interested in how you started Elevate and how mindset has played such a role in your business life and personal life.
Absolutely. So I got my professional career started in the corporate world, and I was actually doing marketing for a Fortune 500 company, and I was really enjoying myself. I was learning so much. I was applying, the things that I had learned in college and so forth, just being a marketing major. And I was always fascinated with the psychology of business and why consumers do the things they do, why people behave the way they do. And I always thought it would be exciting to be a part of that process and influence that process and really kind of guide behavior and drive value as a result. I mean, I actually reflect back and think back as a kid. And, I played basketball growing up, and I remember seeing Nike shorts and just being like, wow, Nike is just such an amazing brand. And I had no clue that I was, the value proposition of that brand was being communicated to me subconsciously and so forth as a kid. And as I started to get more and more familiar with the tactics and the strategies and the psychology behind colors and branding and fonts and all these different things and communication and advertising and that entire process, to me, it was just unbelievably fascinating. And so I started my career in the corporate world, applying that sort of thought process and that entire application and adding value in an organization. And I was kind of slowly climbing that ladder. And as I kind of looked around, I was like, wow, I'm really enjoying this. And, I was working with franchisees all across the world, and we were launching our brand in, the Middle East and South America and Eastern Europe and Asia. And it was just like, it was amazing because all these different cultures interacted with our brand in different ways. And one region would look at our brand as a premium brand. It was actually a restaurant company. And in America, it was kind of seen as an affordable value proposition. It was just very, very interesting to me. And it was endlessly intellectually stimulating. But what was not intellectually stimulating was corporate America, frankly. I mean, it was like I bumped up in corporate America and was like, wow, I started to see the politics at play, and that kind of turned me off. And it took me a little bit of time, in fact, a few years, before I really took action on those feelings of discontent. I was starting to feel like, man, this just doesn't feel right, because I felt like I was adding more and more value. I was pushing the limits. I was creating efficiencies and effectiveness, in my role and for the organization, driving value. But I didn't feel like I was being properly rewarded. And it felt like, it was more so, hey, how long have you been in this position? Because that then translates to your next promotion. Initially my thought was, you know what, I'm going to climb the corporate ladder to the C-suite. I'm going to be an executive for this organization or another organization similar to this in this kind of vantage point. And, as I started to look around, I was like, I'm going to be climbing this ladder for 30 years if I really want to get to where I want to go. And that didn't resonate with me, but I also didn't have any reference point as to what else was out there. So I started to kind of ask questions. I just started to ask people around me, hey, what else should I be doing? And the first kind of dead end path that I took was, hey, get your resume ready and go start interviewing with other organizations and doing that whole deal. And long story short, obviously I kind of found out that, like, look, I'm going to run into the corporate America type of culture at any of these corporations. Even the organization that I worked for at the time was actually, it was voted top 50 best place to work in America. And it was interesting because I was like, man, I could see there's some good parts of the culture, but it was like, at the other side of the fence, it's like, I don't know. I mean, if this is as good as it gets, then I don't know if I want to go any further. So I started to ask around. It's like, well, what other skills do I have? What other things could I do? Because look, I went to school, my whole background, I grew up middle class, and my parents taught me, hey, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and, put 10% away in your nest egg and, your 401k. And by the time you're 65 and a half or whatever, I don't even know what the age is nowadays, 67, it's probably going to go up to 72, right off into the sunset. And so I followed that path because who was I to question that? These people know what they're talking about. And I kind of learned the hard way. This is kind of throughout my 20s that, my growing up, so to speak, after college. And I started to kind of ask around, well, what other skills do I have? What do you see within me? What other opportunities are out there in sort of the world? And long story short, I came across an individual who is a residential real estate agent. And he said, hey, I don't know if this could be the right fit for you, but you should come to we have a seminar next Wednesday night. Come check us out and, see if real estate is a career path that you might want to take. And I said, okay, well, fine. That sounds good. And he was actually my realtor. I had purchased a home with him, with his help. And I found it was a very helpful experience. I did enjoy the experience. And so I went to the seminar, and I apologize for the very long-winded response.
No. This is fantastic. I've known you for a long time, and I never knew you were the residential agent thing. So
I was kind of reflecting on that too. It's like, I don't even know if Holly knows this, but so I went to the seminar, and I took a personality test after the seminar, and they asked everybody to take a personality test. Personality test comes back and says, you have a personality that would fit to make, 6 figures in this business. And I'm like, oh man, 6 figures. That sounds amazing. It was, more than double probably what I was making at the time, as being sort of a bit of a peon in the corporate world as I was climbing the corporate ladder. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, right? Because actually the other thing too, is like, I had some things in life that were happening to me that, by the way, it felt like I was close to paycheck to paycheck. I mean, I was a corporate employee working, 50 plus hours a week, but I was still living somewhat paycheck to paycheck. And, I was a young guy and that kind of stuff. So I wasn't supporting a family, but at the same time, more money was intriguing to me. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to get my real estate license, and I'm going to start selling houses on the side. And that's what I started to do. And over the next 6 months, as I got my license and as I got my feet underneath me, I ended up doubling my income, and I was doing it on the side. I was just selling houses. And as I was doing that, I was like, okay, this is good. I doubled my income. I solved a financial problem. However, it's like, wow, this is a pretty emotional process. I didn't realize how emotional people got with buying homes and things like that. And I was like, all right, I'm not really interested in that. But it was like my foot was in the door into this whole real estate world, which is a very broad term, as you know. Mm-hmm. And real estate, I started to recognize, was like, wait, it's not just houses. There are commercial properties, there's land, there's multifamily, there's development, there's all these different things, right? So there was this, it was kind of like a labyrinth that I wasn't really aware of at the time. But as I kind of got more ingrained in the business, and once I started to learn more, I started to recognize new opportunities. And I actually got referred. I was actually building a business based on referral. And it was all about building my network and learning about how I can add value, learning about assets and how they generate cash flow and how they can create upside and tax mitigation, all these different things. And as I started to kind of step further into that education, I got referred to a group who owned a large portfolio of multifamily properties, office, and retail. And they said, you know what, we need a young hustler to go out there and sell our properties because we have a scattered site portfolio. We're looking to go bigger. And I was like, man, I don't know anything about that, but that looks like a big listing that I could take on. And I kind of dove into the deep end. That was my first foray into this. And there's a lot more that I could say about sort of the shift that I made from being an employee to an entrepreneur, and also what I learned about being an investor by this guy named Robert Kiyosaki. You know, as I was getting started in the business, I actually hired a coach to help me build my business and to help me, you know, not only just be a salesperson, but run it as a business. And a lot of the things that he was talking to me about was mindset. It was about beliefs. It was about perspective. It was about, you know, looking at problems as opportunities and gifts. And some of that stuff was stuff that I'd never heard before. It was like, I guess I'll just trust the process here. And he was telling me about books like, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich. And when I read those books originally, it was like, man, it was like almost everything that I had learned growing up, you know, in terms of go to school, get good grades, get a good job, was almost flipped on its head. And I had to unlearn so much. And it was this extremely immersive experience that I was learning real estate, but I was also truly learning about how my mind worked and how other people's minds worked as well, so that I could influence other people, so that I could help more people, so that I could add more value to more people. And I became extremely fascinated with it because as I started to apply these things started to happen easier for me. I started to create more income. I started to create more opportunities. I started to meet people that I dreamed about. And once I started to become immersed in that, I almost became addicted to it. And it was like, wait a minute, what else could I apply this to? And so that's kind of my first foray into the mindset world. But Holly, what do you think about all that?
Listen, the story is so similar, right? Except for I stayed in the corporate world a lot longer. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and in the corporate world, your job, what happens is that your job is to get your boss promoted, not yourself. And when you start promoting yourself, that is not a good thing because your boss does not like for you to do that. Right.
See, I never even learned that.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, when you become the best and everyone wants, you know, in the group or whatever, then they don't want you to be better than them. They want you to help them get promoted. So that was probably the biggest aha moment for me relative to, you know, the business world. So I kept changing jobs. So every 3 or 4 or 5 years, I would go work for another place. And every single one of them, I ended up being, you know, I'm a good, you know, all the personality tests. I took all of Myers-Briggs, all of them, and every one of them said, you're an extrovert. It's like, okay, well, what a news flash, right? But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what frustrated me because I kept hitting what I thought was the glass ceiling, but it's really not. It's just a ceiling, right? And you know, only a couple of people. And then the other thing is I found out through my coach, which is your coach, you know, later on, that my coach really helped me leave that job, and primarily because he helped me through a lot of mindset stuff, realize that I really hated managing people. I really didn't want to run a sales division with people all over the country. I didn't want to sit and talk to these clients that didn't, that were wonderful people, but I really just I wasn't interested in packaged goods, right? And I was working at that time. I opened up countries for, a major packaged goods manufacturer, and we sold, diapers and paper towels and whatever. And you know what? I wasn't that into it. And at the same time, I'm very grateful though to the corporate world, because I feel like I wouldn't be able to be doing what I'm doing. But it taught me a couple of things. Taught me how to talk to people, taught me how to, really bring people along with me on the journey. Right. But it really taught me too that there's a place where you get to the point where you just know what you don't want to do, and it was enough. And so my motives were not necessarily financial, but what it was about sharing what you're talking about. We are brainwashed into the stock market. Right. And not that the stock market is bad, but that's all we know. So I invested in this thing called multifamily, and I did it basically to help a friend. I didn't even know what I was doing. Right. I just said, okay, here's some money. And through the course of that, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad a long time before that. And I was buying these single family houses on the side, and I saw how much work it was. And I didn't realize that you could do this syndication thing. So when I invested in this, that's when I really learned and what it did for my life and our taxes and income, and not having, I watched my parents spend all their money. And it's so interesting because what's happening now is critical that people really understand that there's a whole world out there of private investing, and all we hear about is Bernie Madoff, right? And that's all they want us to know, is that if you go and invest in a private whatever, it's dangerous. It's risky. Well, I'll tell you something. If I hadn't done that, I'm 60 years old and my husband is 65. He didn't start listening to me till later on, but if I had kept everything that I had, basically, except for a couple of houses and stuff, in the stock market, I would be terrified right now. And that's exactly what happened to my parents. So even the safe stuff today is down, right? And it does that, right? It always does that. It always goes up and down, up and down. And if you have time, you can wait for it to go back up. But if you don't have time and you need that money, you have to sell the asset to get the money to live on. And that's what they teach us in these retirement things. So that was my motivation, but I just did it a lot later than you, right?
Yeah. No, it is really interesting. And, the thing that actually, one of the reasons why I got into sort of the mindset piece of this was when I was transitioning from an employee to an entrepreneur. And I'd love to hear your sort of take on this as well, an entrepreneur and investor. I learned that I was encountering sort of that day-to-day volatility much closer. It's almost like I was insulated from it as an employee. And, I was trying to get promoted myself, which sounds like I was running up the wrong stream in the corporate world, but I was insulated from it. And so I was almost on the front lines of my own emotions to a much higher degree as an entrepreneur and an investor. And so I was like, I almost had to figure out, like, how do I own my emotions and how do I own my mindset? Because I knew that I had a clue that how I felt, if I felt sort of negative emotions or fear or doubt or worry, that I was acting and I was behaving in a self-sabotaging way. And so it was giving me more of the negative results that I didn't want. And so I had to get out of that. And so that's why I was like constantly, I was reading these books and I was going to conferences and going to seminars. And I started to learn about the patterns where people who were the most successful people as investors and entrepreneurs, which, by the way, Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant is key. Like, that's the foundation, from a financial intelligence perspective. But then on an emotional intelligence perspective, the people who are successful on those sides of the quadrant, whether it's a business owner, an investor, it comes down to what are you doing in investing in your mindset? How are you expanding your mind? What are you doing to invest in your own personal development? What sort of rituals and processes and those kind of things do you do to interact with other people? How are you maximizing your talents? How are you making decisions? At the end of the day, we get paid on decisions. And if we're making decisions out of fear, then you know what, we're not going where we want to go. Where focus goes, energy flows is one of the things that Coach Trevor really talks a lot about, but really it's Tony Robbins. I mean, at the end of the day, that makes so much sense. And what I don't think a lot of people realize is that their emotions and where the focus is going towards the emotions, and they're getting more of what they don't want. They're not focusing on where they want to go. And so you were asking me earlier, it's like, well, why did I get into this mindset piece? Because I almost feel like it was almost an intuition. I felt like if I want to go where I want to go, and if I really want to create a life of fulfillment and abundance and live beyond sort of the ordinary, I had to do what the greatest were doing. And they were investing in their own mindset. They were investing in their own mind expansion and personal development. And that to me was a pattern. Like the people that I felt like were moderately successful were focused on the strategies and the tactics and the tips and the tools. Right. And like that stuff is good. Don't get me wrong. But I firmly believe 80% of our success in anything is our psychology. 20% is the mechanics. And I've seen that work. And so it's just something that I've become extremely passionate about.
It is truly amazing. You know, my daughter has started college and Parents Weekend is why I feel good about where she is, because the provost spoke and he said, you know, our admissions office doesn't make mistakes. Every one of you has the intelligence to do well here. But let me tell you, I know, like, I can sit here and cite study after study, and I know what I'm talking about. After this baseline intelligence, there is absolutely zero correlation between being more intelligent and success out in the world. There's absolutely no correlation. So it really, you're right. It has nothing to do with how intelligent you are. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably pretty smart, right?
That's right. I agree.
You know, so don't worry about that, because you have what it takes to do to go big in your life. You know, I know one of the sayings that you have is go big, right? And so, you know, it's right there, all the tools, but we are surrounded by negativity because, you know what? You could say they, I don't know, the media is the worst thing. The media, the people in charge, I don't know, they want things to be bad, right? And that's what we hear about is the bad. But we don't hear so much of the good. And you're exactly right. Focusing on the good and realizing that, hey, I got here too. I'm at this school too. So I must be smart too. Right.
Absolutely.
And there's no reason why I can't do, you know, bigger things. And there's no reason too why, you know, I also noticed that my biggest problem is it's day to day, and not having that boss to promote has been the biggest adjustment for me. How about you? Have you had a hard time with that?
So that's a really good point. And, you know, the thing about it is every day, it's like, we can't really rest on our laurels. It's, you know, yes, you create habits and rituals and things that you just kind of fall into. And a lot of this stuff is creating momentum and being pulled into a certain direction and surrounding yourself with the right people. But also at the end of the day, it does come down to your own personal development. And on a daily basis, that comes down to, well, how are you recreating yourself today? And if you think about it, this is a really interesting concept. There's a pattern in everything in the universe. After 7 years, every cell in our body is replaced with a new cell. Every single one comes down to the organs, internally, externally, our skin, our eyes, our bones, everything. It's all recreated. And so if you think about it from a biological level, and I'm not a scientist, but if that's the case, then there is a correlation in terms of how are we recreating our behavior and our habits and the way that we interact with our relationships with people in our world, the way that we're making decisions on investments, the way that we're investing in ourselves. Because, by the way, the best investment we can make is in ourselves. I mean, we're talking about really hidden investing. I mean, I think it starts there as far as I'm concerned. And so we've got to be investing in ourselves, whether it's having conversations like this, whether it's listening to conversations like this, whether it's, reaching out to people and having conversations with them, reading books, going to places where we're going to be surrounded by people who are doing the things that we want to do. It's not easy because we have to take that initiative, and sometimes we don't feel like it. But
I don't know where to take it. Right? I mean,
exactly.
That's what Coach Trevor has done for me. I mean, I'm maybe ready to take a step, but what should I do first?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You need mentors. You need guidance. One thing that Brian and I talk about, Brian is my business partner, as you know very well.
Yes.
And he says this all the time, and I love it. And it's steal shamelessly and improve. And what it means, essentially, another way of saying model success. Success leaves clues. Mm-hmm. There's so many clues of other people who are doing what you want to do. Unless you're Elon Musk, who is looking to take us to Mars and colonize Mars, and then who knows where we're going after that. There is a model of success. So let's replicate that. Let's make it our own. Let's try it. The other thing, too, is, and the reason why mindset is a key, is that, like, if you're going to do that, the internal dialogue may say, well, I'm not as smart as that person. Mm-hmm. Well, if I try that, I might fail, or I might get embarrassed. And like, okay, that's interesting. It's interesting that we're having that dialogue, because guess what? I know you do this. I do this on a daily, I have that dialogue with myself on a daily basis. It's like, well, I don't know what to do. And if I do it, I might fail. Well, what if we separated that voice and said, okay, that's interesting. Lower self who says, you know what, I want to play it safe, because if I play it safe, I can't lose. And if I don't lose, all these things that I know around me are going to remain where they are. But I believe, and this is one of the reasons why I admire you so much, like, you're doing this podcast. You don't have to do this podcast at 60 years old. You don't need to do this podcast, but you're pushing it because you're going bigger. And the reason why you said, hey, it was important that one of my mantras is go big, is because I believe, and I've seen this in science, and surrounded myself with psychologists and people who understand human beings to the core level much more than you or I do. But we are designed to go big. We are designed to go big. And if we don't, it's really, really, really bad for us. Mm-hmm. And when we, the society, media, teachers, our family members, they have beaten us down to a point where we don't want to go big, or we don't feel like we are designed to go big, because that's dangerous. But that's wrong. And so we've got to surround ourselves with people like you, who encourage us to push the bounds and find comfort in being uncomfortable. Like, all of these little things, these are tools towards getting there.
Well, you know what? You have to. When I started multifamily, I found a common denominator, or several common denominators with investors. People that my net worth is a square root of theirs, right? Thought that things were dangerous and that sort of thing, that it was risky and all of this, when what I was trying to tell them was, this is amazing. We're bypassing all the people that rats on a Cheeto that take a cut, on the what, right? But what I found was, we are taught things, and that's why the 10 myths of hidden investing exist, right? Because I found that once you understand those things, and once you can internalize those things, that our money system is broken, and we are not told the whole story. And we, the people that love us, supposedly, are trying to help us, are really not. They're trying to get themselves promoted, or their boss promoted, right? And so are reelected or whatever, right? And so once you know that, you can't not know. Then what do you do? Right? Then what do you do? And there's no way to not know once you know.
So that is so good. And it's cool because once you start to form your identity in the fact that, well, wait a minute, failure is not fatal, but it's feedback. And if we know that our money system is broken, then we can feel confident in ourselves to move forward and take action.
Correct.
Because no matter what, we're going to win. And, you're either going to achieve your outcomes or you're going to get the feedback necessary to course correct and improve in the future. Like Ray Dalio wrote this great book. It's called Principles. He also wrote another great book called The Changing World Order and how to deal with that and all this kind of stuff. Both are great books. But in Principles, he talks about his progress as in Bridgewater Associates. By the way, it's, one of the biggest hedge funds in the world. Whether you agree with what he's doing or what they're doing, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what he's talking about is progress requires failure. And so
without a doubt.
Once you recognize that, hey, you know what, no matter what, I'm going to win if I take action, I move forward. There's no such thing as standing still. Right. We're either growing or we're either dying. And so we've got to choose growth. We've got to choose expansion. And by the way, in every decision we're making, this is an interesting one. I didn't realize this, but every micro decision is based on either expansion or contraction. And if we're making decisions based on contraction, well, we're making decisions based on death, based on a lack of a future, lack of inspiration, a fear. But if we make decisions based on expansion, it doesn't necessarily feel good in the moment. But when you recognize that discomfort is a pathway towards growth and expansion, then on the other side of that, all the rewards are there. And I believe that ultimately, progress is required for us to walk through that door. And it's a very discomfort.
And once I began to surround myself, once I knew a couple of people to reach out to, they introduced me to other people that had that mindset. And that people say, oh, okay, so I agree our money system is broken, right? And I agree with what you're talking about, right? So what do I do now? Well, what you do now is join our family and our tribe.
Yeah.
Right. And, I've found, it's an attraction, and so now, I still have lots of friends in the corporate world, and that's their thing, right? Most of them are, and I enjoyed the Super Bowl and car services to the airport and all of those things. But at the end of the day, I have a friend that works for a major sports network, and he's like, I get tickets to the Super Bowl every year. I'm sick of the Super Bowl.
It is really fun though, the people that you meet. And that's, you almost have to go reach out. Like if you're listening to a podcast, reach out to the guest or reach out to the host and introduce yourself. And hey, it's like, I want to learn more about what is your tribe about. You were just talking about like Holly, I feel like our tribe is like, it's so strong and it's filled with people who are unbelievable people. And we allow them to all communicate with each other and build friendships and relationships together. They do business together. They do business with us. So whether or not people are doing business with us, just find the people that you align with. That's and right. Trust your gut, trust your intuition, because that I think is we have this thing called infinite intelligence. We don't realize how much intelligence is there. It's more than you or I could ever come up with consciously. So trust your intuition.
That's exactly right. And speaking of, we're almost out of time. I could talk to you all day.
Me too.
And, I think that you're leaving us with is there something, in the next a few sentences that has been the most powerful thing for you and that we could leave our listeners with? Anything?
I mean, there's so much. I think
there's so much.
Well, it comes down to, in my opinion, we're on a journey. And it is about, it's exploring the opportunities to grow throughout that journey, because no day is static. No week is static. No month is static. No year is static. Our life is not static. We're talking about the correlation between the biology and, our own growth, but lean into growth and be willing to find the gifts and challenges and expand through that. But, when we're talking about real estate, it's surround yourself with the right team, because, we cannot do this ourselves. You were talking about the lack of scalability in single family homes. And I found the same thing in small multifamily. And as we scaled and we brought in a team of professionals and people that bring in different talents, like you and I, our talents are connecting with people and communicating and inspiring and in some ways, helping people make decisions at the end of the day. And those are some of our talents. But there's so many other people that make this whole thing go around. So surround yourself with the right team, but you've got to lean in to the discomfort, and you've got to lean into recognizing that, we have this inner dialogue that wants to hold us back, that wants to sabotage our dreams. But anything that you want is possible. Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to commit to the process. You've got to get clear on where it is that you want to go. And guess what? You don't have to do it all, but just recognize that it is possible, and you can, and you were designed to go big. Yeah.
And find out what you're good at and blow it out of the water.
Absolutely.
Right? So this has just been so eye-opening and just fantastic. And I can't, you're my, I love partnering with you. It really does take a village to do an apartment economy. You have to have all kinds of different talents to make it happen. And, I just appreciate you so much. Brian, we'll get Brian on the show at some point soon too. And thank you so much. You're my podcast mentor.
Holly, you're my hero in so many ways. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And thank you to the listeners for listening. And hopefully they got tremendous value. But thanks again. And you are going to kill it on this podcast. I already know.
Well, that's what it's about, is spreading the message faster. Because we're in big trouble. There are a lot of people that are in big trouble financially. And there are ways to diversify and make that a little better. At least that's been my experience.
Can I give you a shout out? Because you and I were in Austin about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about this. And, as you're getting prepared for your podcasts, and one of the things that I just know is so deep and true to who you are is that you truly want to help. Like you're mentioning, like we've got a lot of very challenging issues. And, from a financial perspective, if you don't have financial intelligence, it's going to be very difficult to have any type of freedom in modern society. So I just wanted to give you a tremendous shout out for shedding light on these myths and on where people can take this, because we can either, put the control in the hands of Wall Street, or we can take control back and create what it is that we want in our life. So you're doing this and you're giving this to people. So I think it's amazing. And I just appreciate your friendship so much.
Well, I hope that we can continue this, and thanks to everybody. And we will talk to you week after next. We're going to do this once every 2 weeks if we can. So there you go. Thanks again, Tyler. Bye.
Bye, Holly.
Thank you for listening to the Hidden Investing Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with your friends and family. To get an exclusive gift, visit hiddeninvesting.com.